Forced to wed her sister's blind millionaire groom, she froze when he finally touched her face. Before we dive into this extraordinary tale of unexpected love, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. And tell us in the comments which state you're watching from. We love hearing from our amazing viewers. Now let's uncover how a forced marriage became the beginning of something neither of them saw coming. Emma Rodriguez stood before the full-length mirror in her childhood bedroom, staring at a wedding dress that was never meant to be hers. The ivory silk hung perfectly on her 24-year-old frame, altered hastily by their family seamstress just hours before. But this wasn't her wedding. It was supposed to be her sister Carmen's. 3 days ago, Carmen had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a note. "I can't marry a man I've never seen. I'm sorry, Emma. Take care of the family." The family Carmen referred to was drowning in debt. Their father's construction business had collapsed after a series of bad investments, leaving them facing bankruptcy and the loss of their family home. The arranged marriage to Alexander Blackwood, heir to the Blackwood fortune and unfortunately blind since a car accident 5 years prior, was supposed to be their salvation. "Misha, you look beautiful," her mother whispered from the doorway, though her eyes were red from crying. "Alexander won't know the difference. Carmen and you have similar voices, similar height." Emma turned away from the mirror, her stomach churning with guilt and terror. "Mama, this is fraud. When he finds out, he won't find out if you're careful," her father interrupted, entering the room with desperation written across his weathered face. "Emma, please. We lose everything if this marriage doesn't happen. The contract is already signed. The money has been transferred to save the business." Emma closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her family's survival on her shoulders. She had always been the responsible one, the one who sacrificed her dreams for everyone else's needs. While Carmen pursued her art and traveled, Emma had worked double shifts to help pay bills and care for their aging grandmother. "He's expecting Carmen," Emma said weakly. "They've been corresponding for months. They've talked on the phone. You studied theater in college," her mother said desperately. "You can imitate Carmen's voice perfectly. You always could, even as children." The limousine was already waiting outside. Through her bedroom window, Emma could see neighbors gathering to catch a glimpse of the wedding procession. The entire neighborhood knew about this arrangement, the poor Rodriguez family's daughter marrying the wealthy blind heir. It was like something out of a fairy tale, except fairy tales didn't usually involve this much deception. Emma's hands shook as she picked up Carmen's veil. Her sister had left behind everything: her clothes, her jewelry, her entire identity. Now Emma was expected to step into that identity and become someone she wasn't. "What if he touches my face?" Emma whispered, voicing her deepest fear. "What if he realizes I'm not her?" Her parents exchanged a look. They had obviously considered this possibility. "Carmen told us he never. He's very respectful," her mother said carefully. "The arrangement is more business than romance. He needs a wife to satisfy the terms of his inheritance, and we need financial security. Physical intimacy, that might never be an issue." Emma felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness at this revelation. She would be married to a stranger who would never truly see her, never truly know her. She would spend her life pretending to be someone else, living a lie to save her family. The church bells began to ring in the distance. It was time. As Emma descended the stairs in her sister's wedding dress, she caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. For a moment, she didn't recognize the woman looking back. The dress transformed her, made her look elegant and sophisticated in a way she had never felt before. "Remember," her father whispered as they reached the front door, "you are Carmen Rodriguez today. You have been corresponding with Alexander for 8 months. You met through a mutual family friend. You love classical music and painting. You speak 3 languages. I know," Emma interrupted softly. She had spent the last 3 days memorizing every detail of Carmen's fabricated persona, every lie her sister had told to win this wealthy man's interest. The limousine door opened, and Emma stepped inside, leaving her old life behind. In 1 hour, she would become Mrs. Alexander Blackwood. The question that terrified her most was simple. What would happen when her new husband inevitably discovered that his bride was not the woman he thought he was marrying? The drive to the church felt like a journey to her execution, each mile taking her further from the truth and deeper into a deception that would define the rest of her life. The St. Catherine Cathedral loomed before Emma like a beautiful prison. Its Gothic spires reached toward heaven, but she felt anything but blessed as the limousine pulled up to the entrance. Through the tinted windows, she could see the crowd gathered, society's elite business associates, and reporters capturing every moment of what they believed was a romantic union. Emma's breathing became shallow as she realized the magnitude of the deception she was about to commit. This wasn't just lying to one man, this was fraud in front of 300 witnesses, God and the law. "Miss Carmen," the driver said gently, "we've arrived." Carmen. She had to become Carmen now, completely and convincingly. The cathedral doors opened, revealing an interior draped in white roses and gold ribbon. The guest list read like a who's who of New York society. Senators, CEOs, old money families whose names graced buildings and charities throughout the city. Emma realized that Alexander Blackwood wasn't just wealthy, he was American royalty. Her father appeared at the limousine door, his face grave but determined. "Remember, mija, you're saving all of us today." Emma took his arm, her legs trembling beneath the layers of silk and tulle. As they walked down the aisle, she could hear whispers from the assembled guests. "She's more beautiful than I expected." Poor Alexander marrying a girl he's never seen. The Rodriguez family certainly struck gold with this arrangement. The whispers felt like daggers. These people saw her as a gold digger, a social climber who had trapped a vulnerable blind man. If only they knew the truth, that she was an even bigger fraud than they imagined. And then she saw him. Alexander Blackwood stood at the altar with perfect posture, his dark hair impeccably styled, wearing a tailored black tuxedo that probably cost more than Emma's family made in a year. At 36, he was devastatingly handsome in a way that made Emma's breath catch. His face was strong and angular, with the kind of aristocratic features that belonged on currency or marble statues. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold. They were a striking gray-blue, clear and intelligent, but they looked just slightly past her, focusing on nothing. The reminder of his blindness hit her like a physical blow. This man would never see her face, never know who she really was unless she chose to tell him. As she approached the altar, Alexander turned slightly toward the sound of her footsteps. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. Not a smile of love, but one of polite satisfaction. This was a business transaction for him, nothing more. "Carmen," he said softly as she reached his side, and Emma nearly flinched at hearing her sister's name spoken so intimately. "Alexander," she replied, modulating her voice to match Carmen's slightly higher pitch and more refined accent. The ceremony began with Father Martinez reading from scripture about love and commitment. Emma felt like a hypocrite standing there, promising to love and honor a man she had met 60 seconds ago, using a name that wasn't hers. Alexander's hand found hers during the vows, and Emma was surprised by the warmth and strength of his grip. His hands were elegant but calloused, not the soft hands of someone who had never worked. When it came time for him to speak his vows, his voice was deep and sincere, even though Emma knew he was marrying a stranger. "Carmen," he said, his sightless eyes looking in her general direction, "I promise to provide for you, protect you, and respect you as my wife. Though our beginning may be unconventional, I hope we can build something meaningful together." Emma's throat closed up as she realized the sincerity in his voice. This man was entering this marriage with hope for genuine connection, while she was entering it based on complete deception. When it came time for her vows, Emma nearly stumbled over Carmen's name, catching herself just in time. "Alexander, I promise to be faithful to you and to honor our commitment." She couldn't bring herself to promise love she didn't feel to a man she was actively deceiving. The ring ceremony was torture. Alexander's fingers were gentle as he slipped the platinum band onto her finger, and Emma noticed that his own wedding ring was simple, elegant, clearly chosen with care. This wasn't just a business transaction for him. He had put thought into these details. "You may kiss the bride," Father Martinez announced. Emma's heart stopped. This was the moment she had dreaded. Alexander's hands came up to gently cradle her face, and for a terrifying second, she thought he might realize she wasn't Carmen through touch alone. But he simply leaned in and pressed a chaste, gentle kiss to her lips. It lasted only a moment, but Emma felt something unexpected. A flutter of attraction, a spark of something that had nothing to do with duty or deception. As they turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, Emma realized that the hardest part wasn't over. It was just beginning. The Blackwood estate sprawled across 50 acres of pristine countryside, 2 hours north of New York City. Emma pressed her face to the limousine window, watching as they passed through iron gates that looked like they belonged to European royalty. Ancient oak trees lined the driveway, leading to a mansion that looked like it had been transplanted directly from an English period drama. "Welcome home, Mrs. Blackwood," Alexander said softly, and Emma flinched at the name that felt so foreign on her tongue. The staff was lined up to greet them. A housekeeper named Mrs. Harrison, who looked like she could run a small country, a groundskeeper named James who tipped his hat respectfully, and several others whose names Emma tried desperately to memorize. They all addressed her as Mrs. Carmen, and each time felt like another nail in the coffin of her true identity. Alexander moved through his home with the confidence of someone who had memorized every detail. Emma watched in fascination as he navigated stairs and furniture without hesitation, his hand occasionally trailing along walls or railings for guidance. She realized that his blindness wasn't a disability here. It was simply a fact of life he had adapted to masterfully. "I'll show you to your room," he said once they were alone in the grand foyer. "I thought you might prefer your own space, at least initially." Emma felt a mixture of relief and unexpected disappointment. "That's very considerate." He led her up a sweeping staircase to the second floor, his hand resting lightly on an ornate banister that had probably been polished by generations of staff. "Your room is here," he said, opening a door to reveal a suite that was larger than Emma's entire childhood home. The room was decorated in soft blues and creams, with French doors leading to a private balcony. Fresh flowers adorned every surface, and Emma realized that someone had taken great care to make this space welcoming for the new bride. "It's beautiful," Emma whispered, and meant it. "I had it redecorated based on your letters," Alexander said, and Emma's blood ran cold. "You mentioned loving French Impressionist art and soft colors. I hope I got it right." Emma looked around the room with new eyes, seeing Carmen's influence in every detail. Her sister had been crafting this deception for months, building a personality and preferences that would appeal to this man. Emma was now trapped in Carmen's web of lies, expected to maintain preferences and interests that weren't her own. "It's perfect," she lied, though her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. Alexander paused in the doorway, his head tilted slightly as if listening to something only he could hear. "Carmen, are you all right? You sound different. Tired, perhaps?" Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. Even without sight, he was already noticing discrepancies. "Just overwhelmed," she managed. "It's been a long day," he nodded sympathetically. "Of course. Take all the time you need to settle in. Mrs. Harrison will help you with anything you require." As he turned to leave, Emma felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to call him back, to confess everything, but the weight of her family's debt and her father's desperate face flashed through her mind. "Alexander," she called softly. He stopped, turning back toward her voice. "Yes? Thank you for all of this." Something shifted in his expression, a softness that made him look younger, more vulnerable. "You don't need to thank me, Carmen. We're married now. Taking care of you is not a burden." After he left, Emma sank onto the enormous bed, surrounded by luxury she had never imagined possible. But the beauty around her felt like a gilded cage. She was living in a room decorated for someone else, married to a man who thought she was someone else, trapped in a life built on lies. That evening, dinner was served in a formal dining room that could have seated 30 people. Alexander sat at the head of the table, Emma to his right, with enough space between them to park a small car. The distance felt symbolic. They were married but strangers, connected legally but separated by deception. "Tell me about your art," Alexander said as they ate. "In your letters, you mentioned working on a series of landscapes." Emma nearly choked on her wine. Carmen was the artist, not her. Emma could barely draw stick figures, let alone create the sophisticated artwork Carmen had described in her correspondence. "I've been taking a break from painting," Emma said carefully. "The wedding preparations were so consuming." Alexander nodded understandingly. "Of course. Perhaps once you're settled here, you'll feel inspired to create again." I've had a studio prepared for you on the third floor, north-facing windows as you requested. Another detail Carmen had orchestrated. Emma realized she would need to learn to paint, and quickly, or risk exposure. The rest of dinner passed in careful conversation, with Emma deflecting personal questions and Alexander sharing details about his business, a technology company he had inherited and built into an empire despite his disability. She found herself genuinely impressed by his intelligence and drive, which only made her deception feel more shameful. As they said goodnight outside her bedroom door, Alexander hesitated. "Carmen, I want you to know, I don't expect anything from you that you're not ready to give. This marriage may have begun as an arrangement, but I hope in time, we might find genuine companionship." Emma's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. This man was being kinder to her than anyone had a right to expect, and she was repaying that kindness with lies. "Good night, Alexander," she whispered. "Good night, wife." As Emma closed her bedroom door, she realized that the hardest part of this deception wouldn't be maintaining Carmen's lies. It would be fighting the growing attraction she felt toward a man she could never truly have. 3 weeks into their marriage, Emma had settled into a routine that felt both natural and completely artificial. She woke each morning in silk pajamas that cost more than her monthly salary at her old job, ate breakfast prepared by a world-class chef, and spent her days exploring the vast estate while Alexander worked in his home office managing his technology empire. But the hardest part was the evenings. Alexander had made it clear that he wanted to spend time with his new wife, getting to know her better. They shared dinner every night, followed by conversation in his study, a room lined with books in Braille and equipped with the latest technology to accommodate his blindness. "Read to me," he had asked on their fourth night together. "In your letters you mentioned loving poetry." Emma had panicked, knowing Carmen's literary tastes were far more sophisticated than her own. But she had stumbled through some Robert Frost, her voice shaking with nervousness. "You sound different when you read," Alexander had observed, his head tilted in that way she was beginning to recognize. "Your voice becomes softer, more authentic." The comment had terrified Emma, but also thrilled her in a way she couldn't explain. For brief moments when she forgot to maintain Carmen's persona, her true self emerged, and Alexander seemed to prefer it. Now, as Emma sat in the morning sunroom pretending to read a book on art history, she heard Alexander's footsteps approaching. He moved through the house with increasing confidence, and she had noticed he was beginning to navigate toward wherever she was with uncanny accuracy. "Good morning, Carmen," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "What are you reading?" Emma glanced at the book she had randomly selected. The History of Impressionist Movement in France." Research for your painting?" Alexander smiled. "I'm glad you're feeling inspired again." Emma's stomach clenched. She had been avoiding the art studio for weeks, terrified that Alexander would ask to see her work. Last week she had bought basic art supplies and attempted to create something, anything, that might pass for Carmen's sophisticated style. The results had been embarrassingly amateur. "Actually," Alexander continued, "I have something to show you today, something I think you'll find interesting." He led her through the house to a wing she hadn't explored yet. As they walked, Emma found herself studying his profile. Over the past weeks, she had memorized every detail of his face, the way his jaw tightened when he was concentrating, the small scar above his left eyebrow from the accident that had taken his sight, the way his eyes crinkled slightly when he smiled. She was falling for him, and it terrified her. "Here we are," Alexander said, opening a door to reveal a room that took Emma's breath away. It was a conservatory filled with the most beautiful piano she had ever seen, a grand Steinway that gleamed like black marble in the afternoon sunlight. Sheet music was scattered across its surface, and Emma could see that it was all in Braille. "You play?" she asked, momentarily forgetting to modulate her voice to Carmen's pitch. Alexander's head turned sharply toward her, that listening expression crossing his features again. "Yes, do you? I don't remember you mentioning music in your letters." Emma's heart raced. Carmen had never mentioned music because Carmen was tone-deaf and had never shown any interest in instruments. But Emma had played piano since childhood. It was one of the few luxuries her family had managed to afford, buying a used upright piano when she was 8. I play a little," she admitted. "Would you play for me?" Alexander asked. and there was something vulnerable in his voice. "I've been hoping to share this with you." Emma sat at the bench, her fingers hovering over the keys. She knew she should refuse, should claim that Carmen didn't play, should maintain the lie. But something about Alexander's hopeful expression broke down her defenses. She began to play Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, one of her favorite pieces. Her fingers moved across the keys with muscle memory developed over 16 years of playing. The melody filled the conservatory, rich and emotional, and Emma lost herself in the music. When she finished, the silence stretched between them. Alexander had moved closer during her performance, his face turned toward the piano with an expression of wonder. "That was extraordinary," he said softly. "You play beautifully. Why didn't you tell me you were musical?" Emma's mind raced for an explanation. I was shy about it. It's been a while since I played." Alexander reached out slowly, his hand finding hers on the piano bench. The contact sent electricity through Emma's body. "Carmen, that was the most beautiful thing I've heard since..." He stopped, but Emma could fill in the blank. "Since before his accident, since he could see." "Play with me," he said suddenly, sliding onto the bench beside her. Their shoulders touched, and Emma could smell his cologne, something clean and expensive that made her head spin. Alexander's hands found the keys, and he began to play a simple melody that wove perfectly with what Emma had just played. They fell into an improvised duet, their hands occasionally brushing as they reached for the same keys, creating music together that neither could have made alone. As the final notes faded, Alexander turned toward her, his face inches from hers. "I feel like I'm finally getting to know the real you," he said softly. Emma's breath caught. If only he knew how right he was. When she played piano, when she forgot to be Carmen, when she let her guard down, that was when her true self emerged. And Alexander was responding to that authenticity in a way that made her heart ache. "Alexander," she whispered, not sure what she was going to say. His hand came up slowly, hesitating just inches from her face. "May I?" he asked gently. Emma knew she should say no. She knew that letting him touch her face might reveal the deception. But she found herself nodding, forgetting that he couldn't see the gesture. "Yes," she breathed, and then his fingers were on her cheek, tracing the line of her jaw with infinite gentleness. Alexander's fingertips moved across Emma's face like a blind man reading the most important book of his life. His touch was feather-light, reverent, as if he was trying to memorize every curve and angle through his skin. Emma sat frozen on the piano bench, her heart thundering so loudly she was certain he could hear it. This was the moment she had dreaded for weeks, the moment when Alexander would discover through touch that she wasn't the woman he had married. But instead of pulling away in shock or confusion, Alexander's exploration became more tender, more thorough. His fingers traced her cheekbones, the bridge of her nose, the curve of her lips. His thumb brushed across her lower lip, and Emma shivered despite the warmth of the conservatory. "You're so beautiful," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Emma's eyes filled with tears. He thought he was touching Carmen, learning his wife's face for the first time. But he was actually discovering Emma, the real Emma, and calling her beautiful. "Alexander," she breathed, not trusting herself to say more. His hands framed her face now, his thumb stroking her cheeks. "I've imagined this moment for weeks," he admitted. "I wanted to know what you looked like, but I was afraid you might not want me to touch you." Emma's heart broke a little more. This proud, successful man was vulnerable with her, sharing his insecurities about his blindness, his fears of rejection, and she was deceiving him in the cruelest possible way. "I want you to touch me," she whispered, and it was the first completely honest thing she had said since their wedding day. Alexander's breath caught. His hands moved to her hair, fingers threading through the long, dark strands. Emma had always worn her hair differently than Carmen, looser, more natural, but Alexander had no way of knowing that. "Your hair is softer than I imagined," he murmured. "And you smell like vanilla and something floral. Jasmine." Emma nodded, then remembered he couldn't see her. "Yes," she said softly. "Jasmine." It was her perfume, not Carmen's. Another small piece of her true self that Alexander was learning to love without knowing it. His exploration continued, hands moving to her shoulders, her arms, learning the shape of her through touch alone. Emma realized that Alexander was falling in love with her. Not Carmen, but her because touch didn't lie the way voices and names could. "Carmen," he said, and the false name shattered the moment like glass. Emma pulled back abruptly, the spell broken. I should go," she stammered, standing up from the piano bench so quickly that she nearly knocked over the sheet music. Alexander's face showed confusion and hurt. "Did I do something wrong? Did I move too fast?" "No," Emma said quickly, hating herself for the pain in his voice. "You didn't do anything wrong. I need some time." She fled the conservatory, leaving Alexander alone with his confusion and the lingering scent of jasmine. That night, Emma lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of Alexander's touch. Her face still tingled where his fingers had traced her features. She could still feel the warmth of his hands in her hair, the gentle way he had explored her face like she was something precious. For the first time since this deception began, Emma allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to tell Alexander the truth. To confess that she wasn't Carmen, that she was Emma Rodriguez, a 24-year-old woman who had sacrificed herself to save her family. Would he be angry? Disgusted? Would he have their marriage annulled immediately? Or was there a chance, and a small impossible chance, that he might choose her anyway? A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Carmen?" Alexander's voice came through the wood. "May I come in?" Emma sat up, her heart racing. Just a moment." She threw on a robe and opened the door to find Alexander standing in the hallway, still fully dressed despite the late hour. His face showed the strain of someone who had been struggling with difficult thoughts. "I wanted to apologize," he said simply, "for this afternoon. I moved too quickly and I made you uncomfortable." Emma's throat tightened. "Alexander, you don't need to apologize." "Yes, I do," he said firmly. "Carmen, I know this marriage began as an arrangement. I know you didn't choose me out of love. But I had hoped that we might develop real feelings for each other over time." Emma stood in her doorway, wrapped in silk and secrets as this good man laid his heart bare before her. "The truth is," Alexander continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, "I'm already falling in love with you. With your laugh when you think I'm not listening, with the way you play piano like you're pouring your soul into the keys, with your kindness to the staff, your curiosity about everything around you." Emma felt tears streaming down her face. He was falling in love with her, the real her, while believing she was someone else entirely. "I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered. And it was the truest thing she had ever said. Alexander's face transformed with wonder and relief.
"Really?"
"Really," Emma confirmed, her heart breaking even as it soared. He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to find her face again. "Then why did you run this afternoon?" Emma closed her eyes as his fingers found her cheek, wiping away her tears. "Because I'm scared," she said, which was also true, just not in the way he thought. "Of me? Of this? Of how real it feels?" Alexander smiled then, the first truly joyful expression she had seen from him since their wedding. "It is real, Carmen. What's happening between us is real." If only he knew how complicated real could be. 2 months had passed since their wedding, and Emma had never been more miserable or more happy in her life. Her days were filled with moments of perfect contentment. Morning walks with Alexander around the estate, evenings spent playing piano together, quiet conversations that revealed the depth of his intelligence and kindness. But her nights were haunted by guilt and the growing certainty that her deception would eventually destroy everything beautiful they were building together. Alexander had begun talking about the future and about traveling together, about expanding his charitable foundation, about the possibility of children. Each conversation drove the knife of guilt deeper into Emma's heart. She had tried calling Carmen dozens of times, but her sister's phone went straight to voicemail. Emma suspected Carmen had fled to Europe, probably using the money from the Blackwood marriage contract to fund her escape. Meanwhile, Emma was trapped in a life that wasn't hers, loving a man who didn't know her real name. The crisis came on a Thursday morning in October. Emma was in the art studio, attempting to paint something that might pass for Carmen's work, when she heard voices from the courtyard below. Alexander was speaking with someone, a woman whose voice made Emma's blood run cold. It was Carmen. Emma crept to the window and saw her sister standing beside a taxi, looking exactly like someone who had spent 2 months backpacking through Europe. Carmen was bronzed and confident, her hair longer than it had been at the wedding, wearing the kind of effortless style that only came from extended travel. "Alexander, darling," Carmen called out cheerfully. "I'm back from my extended honeymoon trip." Emma watched in horror as Alexander's face went through a series of emotions: confusion, shock, and growing realization. He had been expecting his wife to come down and greet this visitor, but instead this woman was claiming to be his wife. "I'm sorry," Alexander said carefully, "but I think there's been some mistake. My wife Carmen is upstairs." Carmen laughed, the sound sharp and cruel in the autumn air. "Your wife Carmen is standing right here, darling. I don't know who's been playing house with you for the past 2 months, but it certainly wasn't me." Emma's legs gave out, and she sank into the chair beside the easel. This was it, the moment she had been dreading since their wedding day. In minutes, Alexander would learn that everything between them had been built on lies. She could hear footsteps on the stairs, Alexander climbing toward the studio, no doubt to collect the woman he believed was his wife, so she could confront this imposter. Emma stood on shaking legs, knowing she had to face the music. Alexander appeared in the doorway, his face pale and confused. "Carmen, there's someone downstairs claiming to be you." Emma looked at this man she had grown to love desperately, knowing these were likely the last moments she would ever have with him. "Alexander," she said softly, "we need to talk." Something in her voice made him go very still. "What's going on, Carmen?" "My name isn't Carmen," Emma said, the words feeling like glass in her throat. "My name is Emma Rodriguez. I'm Carmen's sister." The silence that followed was deafening. Alexander's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, devastating understanding. "You're not my wife," he said flatly. "No," Emma whispered. "Carmen ran away 3 days before the wedding. My family was desperate. The contract had already been signed, the money transferred. We thought you'd never know the difference." Alexander stepped backward as if she had struck him. "You've been lying to me for 2 months, living in my house, sleeping under my roof, letting me touch you, letting me fall in love with you. And you're not even who you say you are." Emma stepped toward him, tears streaming down her face. "Alexander, please let me explain." "Explain what?" His voice was cold now, colder than she had ever heard it. "Explain how you and your family conspired to defraud me? How you've been laughing at the blind man who couldn't tell the difference between 2 sisters." "No," Emma cried. "It wasn't like that. I never laughed at you. I fell in love with you. You fell in love with my money," Alexander said with devastating quiet. "Just like Carmen was supposed to." "That's not true," Emma said desperately. "Everything between us was real. When we played piano together, when we talked about books and music and your dreams for the foundation, that was all real." Alexander's laugh was bitter. "Real? Nothing about you is real, Emma. Even your name was a lie." Carmen's voice carried up from the courtyard, growing impatient. "Alexander, are you going to invite me in, or should I call my lawyer about this bizarre situation?" Alexander turned toward the stairs, then paused. "Pack your things," he said without looking back at Emma. "I want you gone within the hour." "Alexander, please. And Emma?" He stopped in the doorway. "Don't ever contact me again. I never want to see you again as long as I live." Emma collapsed onto the floor as his footsteps faded down the stairs. She could hear Carmen's delighted laughter as Alexander explained the situation, could hear her sister's voice getting closer as she entered the house. Within an hour, Emma was sitting in the back of the same taxi that had brought Carmen home, watching the Blackwood estate disappear behind the trees. She was leaving behind the only place she had ever been truly happy, the only man she had ever truly loved, and the only version of herself she had ever liked. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Is everything all right? Carmen says there was some mix-up." Emma stared at the message, then turned off her phone. She couldn't deal with her family's questions. Couldn't explain how their desperate plan had backfired so spectacularly. As the taxi pulled onto the highway, Emma allowed herself one last look back toward the estate. Somewhere in that beautiful house, Alexander was probably trying to rebuild his life with the woman he had actually married. Emma wondered if he would ever think of her again, if he would ever remember the moments when they had been genuinely happy together. But as the miles stretched between them, Emma realized she had learned something important during her time as Mrs. Blackwood. She had learned what it felt like to be truly loved. even if that love had been built on a foundation of lies. And somehow, despite everything, that knowledge felt like a gift worth treasuring for the rest of her life. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of love, deception, and heartbreak. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments. Do you believe true love can survive even the biggest lies? Your thoughts and support mean everything to us, and we can't wait to share more incredible stories with you soon.